Just a minute.
Okay.
It takes a minute for YouTube to get us going.
We ready?
Yep, and we're live. Go ahead.
Okay.
Dr. Beck.
I want to welcome everybody to our Police Community Relations and Review Commission meeting. Tonight we have a rather short agenda really, but a topic that I think will take a lot of thought and discussion. Before we start, I want to thank Jessica Green because Zoom meetings in Oxford with Jessica have become pretty routine and doable. And she's also taught a member of the school district how to do it so that ours at the school district goes smoother. So I really have to thank Jessica. And also want to thank Amy Gabbard for typing up the minutes every month. You know, we have to approve minutes at every meeting, and Amy did all the work on those. So I want to do that. I want to welcome everybody who is here as an attendee to speak during public participation or to follow the discussion. I think all of us on this commission and in the city appreciate citizen engagement. I think it's really important that we all stay engaged. So thank you for being here, and to the panelists. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. And the first thing we'll do, and for the commission members, is we need an approval of the agenda. So if I can get a motion to approve the agenda.
Actually, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda if possible for just a brief discussion at the end of the second item on the Black Lives Matter proposed initiatives about the business cards.
Okay, so we would put that after we approve the minutes, a discussion on their second proposal. Okay. Then do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. In a second? Thank you, Hannah. And all in favor, just say aye. I think you got to verbalize it. So all in favor, please say aye.
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 And thank you for unmuting when you do that. Anybody opposed? Okay. The second business item is the approval of the minutes from our August 20th meeting that Amy sent out. I know we sent her one correction. I think you got a corrected version of the minutes. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 20th meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. In a second?
Second.
Thank you, Hannah. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, and anybody opposed? All right, then we'll move on with the agenda. So before we start with the Black Lives Matter's third proposal about researching and funding alternatives to policing, we'll review the second one, which was about the business card. I'm going to pull it up on my other screen so I can remember what it said. So Amber, you wanted to removing barriers to reporting police, and I think that was a proposal where they wanted the business card to include something on the back that would give them citizens a place to give feedback and or complaints. Is that right, Amber?
Yes, so either a QR code or the email address. And I know that Chief Jones is working on a process to be able to make complaints more accessible, even though they might be anonymous. But I've been thinking and reflecting on our role as a commission, and we're leaning into our ordinance more this summer than we have in the past. And as I reviewed the ordinance, I recognized that, part of our job is to make recommendations directly to City Council on some of the matters that we're discussing. And I don't believe we made an official recommendation to City Council for them to work with OPD to get those business cards changed so that they have that information on the back, and that OPD would hand out those business cards at all of their stops. So I'd like to make a recommendation to City Council that they work with OPD on that.
Okay, so the recommendation would be to, I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, but we need to put it in some form that we can actually pass. Require police officers to give civilians their name, badge number, reason for the stop, and a card with instructions for filing feedback and or a complaint with the Police Community Relations and Review Commission.
Correct.
All right. So sort of that phrasing, that provide a card that gives them a chance to give feedback.
Yes.
Okay. So does anybody else on the commission have a comment on that?
Just a quick question. Are you suggesting that this is turned into an ordinance?
No, yeah, we don't do ordinance. This would be a recommendation from this commission to ask the city administration and council to work with the police department to make that happen. Then they do with our recommendation, whatever they choose to do. We're only advisory. And as I think, Amber, you said you looked in the ordinance and it said we're supposed to make recommendations.
Well, so under 141.041, Establishment, Purpose, Membership, and Terms, Section A, it says the objectives of the commission are to advise the chief of police, the city manager, the Civil Service Commission, which I think that name has changed, and the city council about matters relating to policies and procedures of the Oxford Police Division, OPD. And then it goes on into other things like hiring procedures, training of law enforcement, and such other questions as may seem pertinent to the safety and protection of the citizenry. And, we've been sort of a sleepy commission for several years. We haven't had as much public engagement as we have now. Some of our meetings, nobody was there, maybe except for my husband and my friend Lexi. And now we have a lot more public engagement. And I think it's pushed me, at least, to really look at the ordinance more carefully and to try and conduct our meetings in ways that are consistent with our ordinance. And I'm reading straight from the ordinance that one of the things that we've been asked to do is to make recommendations to City Council.
Anybody else on the commission want to comment, add anything?
Support that.
Okay, so Amber, do you want to make an official motion and then we can get a second and vote on it, and then therefore sort of officially advise council and the administration that this is something that we as a commission support?
Yeah, so I'd like to make a recommendation or a motion to put forth a formal recommendation to City Council that for all stops, we require police officers to give civilians their name, badge number, reason for the stop, and a card with instructions for filing a complaint or providing feedback with the Police Community and Review Relations Commission.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor say aye. Please
Aye.
unmute. And anybody opposed?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, then I'll ask Doug the official way I pass that on to City Council from a commission. But I'm sure a few of them are watching and are aware that we've made that more of an official recommendation. I think at our last meeting, we kind of left it as, well, we're working on this. We didn't need to officially give advice. All right.
I think a simple letter to council, to the mayor,
Okay.
CC and the police chief and the city manager, because it does say make recommendations to the police chief, city manager, and city council. So I think a simple letter saying you adopted this motion, this was what you're asking them to do, and that'll suffice.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Okay.
Pat, I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
Normally in your meetings, you do public comment in the beginning, and
Yeah.
did we have about 18 people watching, so I didn't know
Right.
if you wanted to do it today on your agenda.
And somehow on my agenda, I didn't type it in, and I'm looking at my agenda as I'm trying to run the meeting. And
Fair enough. I just, yeah.
but trust me, at some point I would have said, oh, we have 20 people signed in and they want to talk. So maybe since number 2 was not on the agenda, our agenda we had published before we amended it was the 3rd proposal. So I would think the people who are attending came here thinking they could put public participation on the 3rd proposal. So what we'll do at this point is open it up for public participation on the 3rd Black Lives Matter proposal. And then after that, hear from Jessica and I think Lieutenant Fenning about some things that the city's already doing. And then go into a discussion with some representatives from the Black Lives Matter group, and then the commission can discuss and decide if we want to make a recommendation. Okay, so Jessica, you can open it up and let people speak.
Okay, sounds good. If you'd like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button if you are a computer user, and if you are a phone user, you can hit *9, and I'll watch for the blue hands to be raised. Okay, we've got a few. I'm going to go with the phone number first, the 15138. Go ahead. You should probably hit *6 to speak. Okay. *15138. You're still muted. So usually you hit *6. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead. No, now you muted again. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just give me 1 second, please. Trying to figure this Zoom thing out here. Okay, here we go. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Matt Harden. I'm a patrol officer for the City of Oxford Division of Police, a labor management representative for the Patrol Officers Bargaining Unit, and a trustee of the FOP Lodge number 38. Speaking to you this evening as a labor management representative of the Patrol Officers Bargaining Unit for our city's Division of Police. The police officers of the City of Oxford take a great deal of pride in providing an exceptional level of police services to all citizens in our community. We have watched and listened intently to this commission's meetings and look forward to addressing City Council in the future regarding challenges facing law enforcement, specifically the City of Oxford's Division of Police, and issues that are occurring elsewhere. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt. Jessica, is Justin speaking? You're muted and there you go. You're good, Justin.
Thanks. Give me 1 second here. So I want to thank the PCRC for the opportunity to discuss the proposal to City Council to research and fund alternatives to policing, that third proposal we sent off. And I also want to thank the PCRC for allowing members of Black Lives Matter Oxford to have a voice in this conversation. The thing I continue to notice is that a lot of times in these conversations, the only stakeholders represented in conversations around policing tend to be the police themselves. And while I think they need to be involved in the conversation, there are a lot of other people that need to be involved, including community organizations and affected citizens. So BLM Oxford's hoping to change that. We want to engage Oxford citizens to speak up, to share their vision, and to work together in creating, identifying, or enhancing alternative forms of crisis response that directly and expertly address the needs of this community. When I think of the many issues facing Oxford, like substance abuse, housing insecurity, mental health, and racial discrimination, there isn't a single one of those that the police can solve. I want Oxford to be a place where these alternatives are not only real, but they are just as accessible as a 911 call. I'm hopeful that this community, the organizations and institutions that help to guide it, and the police who serve it can join together to identify the needs of Oxford and how best to meet those needs for the good of all of us. Thanks again.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Looking for other hands. Let's see. Okay, we have one more. A Miss Custer. Miss Custer, go ahead.
Hello, and thank you. I'm Sharon Custer with the Family Science and Social Work Department. It's definitely a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I just wanted to let you know that our department has been working with the BLM Oxford team to really understand some of their desires and hopes. And as a social worker who's been in the community for 20 years, I also recognize that there's a lot of really good things going on in Oxford already. And so one of the things that we would like to offer our support as a department and as social workers who've been in the field is just an opportunity to be a resource to you. And whether that's researching what's already out there, helping to collaborate, to fill in gaps, to learn about what other communities are doing. I'm a firm believer that partnerships have to be with organizations, not for organizations. So I definitely want to hear what the key stakeholders want. But we also want to know that, we've got a team of researchers and social workers available to support whatever initiatives you decide to endeavor as well.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see any, Mr. Mead. If you want to proceed.
Okay, yeah. I think at this time, Jessica had informed me that the city, I think, and the police department had been working on some things or wanted to talk about things they were already doing. So as we entered into the conversation, we kind of knew where we were at this time and either things they were doing or things they were planning on doing. I hope I interpreted that right, Jessica. So I think I'll turn it over to you and Lieutenant Fenning. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going to let Lieutenant Fenning go first, and
Okay.
and then I'll end it. So thank you.
Hello. All right. As you all know, I'm Laura Fenning. I thank you for letting me speak. Before my promotions here at Oxford, I have worked as a patrol officer for 20 years in the Oxford area as a street cop, and invested much of my professional time in my career working with the people in need. A lot of us find a niche in our career, whether it be SWAT or traffic or crashes or something like that, canines, but mine ended up being kind of like the social service aspect of it. So I found a lot of fulfillment in that world. And so I feel like I'm your resident go-to person. And I don't feel like we've heard really anything from the police perspective on this about how we do things here at OPD. So the police people call the police to handle their problems, and that's all kinds of problems, and definitely those including social services. And these problems, including social services, are integral part of people's lives. You can't really separate, and I'm a hand talker, you can tell. You can't separate the social service problems or the police problems away from the social service problems. It's all one mixed bag, and we have to deal with it. And we deal with it at 1:15 in the morning. We deal with it at 11:15 at night, at 4:15 in the morning. And that's not when social workers work. So we'd have to deal with it no matter what. So they can't be separated. Let's just take a domestic violence. So that's when everything bad culminates into some violent crime that we have to deal with. But a lot of times there's lots of elements that have led up to that point. And a lot of social services could have helped, contributed to preventing that from happening. So there's a lot of aspects that could have been involved, that should be involved, but we still have to handle that. So the social service type issues are frequently embedded in these police calls. And this is what we know. This is all we know. This is typical for us. This is part of our professional life. I don't think it really bothers us. What kind of bothers us is not having that kind of access to services or the ease of access. Oxford is particularly difficult because there hasn't been a lot of services out here. We're not the county seat. We do have the Family Resource Center. We do have Butler Behavioral, but and those are growing, but it hasn't been easy, especially at night, which is when most of our officers are working. When you consider after hours, like let's just say 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. Police will always have to handle these problems. And like I said, they will always be at most of the time, often all times of day and night, and on the weekends. There's something that kind of bothered me about in that third proposal. It was the
Talk a little bit about like our past and like what we're doing right now before. We'll go ahead in the third, and then we can just talk about what we're doing now.
I'm getting there. But nobody's had an opportunity to hear about the police work really in our town so far.
Okay.
But this does apply, and it's about the stigma of a police uniform. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Is it was mentioned in there that, quote, if a person still works for the police department and acts as a police officer, that stigma will still be present, mentioning the stigma of a police uniform. And I just don't think that's correct. And that this would lessen the officer's effectiveness. But actually, I think being a police officer and going to these problems complements our effectiveness. And we have relationships with these people that are long-standing. We have gone to these people's houses for weeks, months, years, and we know everything about their lives. And they rely on us for that historical knowledge, where they wouldn't want a new officer to go to that house because they don't have to explain everything over again. They trust us. It takes a long time to establish that trust, but they trust us. And don't diminish that trust. We earned it. And so don't think that just because we have a badge and a gun that we don't have that trust, because we do. Absolutely. I have earned 27 years in police work to get that trust, and we have it. And all those guys working out there earn it, and they have it. And so when people come up to us and they beg us for help, it's because we have spent weeks and months and years at their households, spending time with them, working out their problems for them. So that's what I wanted to say. That I don't think that that's true. Okay, so we don't do that old cuff 'em and stuff 'em mentality at all. We take pride in our work. We have the community policing philosophy. We have a commitment to a high level of service, no matter anyone's socioeconomic or societal demographic of whom we are serving. We take a lot of pride in that, just like Officer Harden was saying. We are more highly educated and trained now than we ever were. We have high expectations for our officers. We recruit new officers that have an aptitude for these social service minded skill sets, I should say. And we've hired officers with experience in social work, and we kind of look for that now. And I do the recruiting. And so this is the kind of person that our society, our community has kind of told us that we should go recruit. And so I have. And so I thought that's kind of what we wanted, was someone that had that social service mindset present. So in recent years, I think that we've been pretty aggressive with our endeavors. We've created an overdose response team. We've partnered with addiction specialists at the Hope Line, what used to be called Heroin Hope Line, and we provide opportunities for treatment to those addicted to drugs. Our department has committed to the One Mind campaign, which seeks to ensure successful interactions between police officers and persons affected by mental illness. That's a multifaceted campaign. And that also involves a crisis intervention team training. There's, I think, about 6 of us that have taken it. It's a commitment. And we're working on getting more of us certified in that. Actually, because of that CIT training, crisis intervention team training, there has been a better awareness and familiarity with the agencies in our county, because that's what it focuses on, is like your available agencies and partners in the county, and the importance of those connections. And so I think because of that, that is growing amongst our officers. And within the last couple of years, we've had a better and more robust connection made with Butler Behavioral, and definitely with Family Resource Center since Brad Hablitzel has taken over, and with Access Counseling, because I met Kathy Becker at my CIT training, and Kathy Becker is legendary in social service world with law enforcement. And so we have made a really good partnership. And actually, Access Counseling has been working with Matt Wagers in a program I will talk to you about here shortly. And so real quick, challenges and obstacles though. Services here have not always been convenient in Oxford, which has made it difficult for the user and for the police to refer anybody to anywhere to get help. Most of the time when social services are needed by the police, the social workers are not working. Turnover at social service agencies. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. That's difficult because that, Hannah knows what I'm talking about. That turnover is high. And so staff, you make a connection, you network with someone, and then before you know it, they're gone and they've gone to a different agency. You may see them again, just working for a different agency. This is why I think that higher level, like administrators, need to make that good connection to stay networked well. There's also what I experience as a barrier, a challenge, is the unwillingness of the client, if you want to talk about them like if you want to refer to them as that, but the mentally ill, the homeless, the addict, to receive help. To me, that's like the biggest barrier, because that's the hardest person to work with, because you could try 15 times to get them help and you run into a brick wall, but you try again and you try again, but it's difficult. It's difficult. And even getting a social worker to help you is not always the answer. Transportation could be really difficult with even for social services. So we all have our hands tied in certain ways. So some things to think about when you're thinking about a plan is a challenge is an individual based model versus an organizational based model. So an individual based model would be a social worker who has made all these connections. Now think about somebody working here or contracted to work here. Social worker who has made all these connections with various agencies, has been working with the OPD and leaves abruptly. When they leave abruptly, we lose all of our connections to those area agencies and they're gone. And now it takes time, effort to reestablish all the connections with those social service agencies. I don't think that's a sustainable model. Organization-based, though, the benefit of that is that access to the social service organizations would be shared by everyone at OPD. And that, so if I were to leave OPD, not all is lost. That everybody's got a handle on the connections, and there's no disruption of service. So that's just something to think about. Now, the big news is since the BLM Oxford proposal, that gave me a nudge and Chief Jones a nudge, and the timing came together rather well. Officer Matt Wagers is the SRO, the school resource officer for the middle school. Or the school district is not in person, so he has been working the road, taking calls. So he's not been in school. That worked out well. He's well suited for this task. So we put him in a role where once a week he is connecting services with those in need. And we're trying it out to see how this would work. And I think it's working out really well. He has been mapping our departmental connections with our social service agencies and assessing where the people are with needs in the community, what their needs are, and making appointments with them. And so he's been really busy, actually. And then we've met with agencies. We've met with Family Resource Center, Butler Behavioral. I'm going to meet with another section of Butler Behavioral next week. And he has met with Access Counseling. And in fact, he's had a counselor ride with him for 2 whole shifts. Out of the 3 shifts that he's done this, those 3 weeks in a row, he's had a social worker ride with him for 2 of those shifts. And she would do it as long as he's doing it. And if he has to go back in the school, she's willing to do it with another patrol officer as well. And he also And he also made connections with Hope House Mission today, homeless shelter in Middletown, when he took a homeless person from Oxford to Middletown today. So I feel like we've made great strides in just 2 or 3 weeks in firming up the connections with our community partners and come up with some cool ideas. We've met with Family Resource Center and came up with some neat ideas that Brad's going to be working on. And aside from taking him out of the schedule for one day on a day that we could afford for him to not be working the road, taking calls, this has not cost the city any money. I don't know how long he can do it. As long as school is remaining virtual, he'll do it on Thursdays, as long as that works out for us on our schedule. But so he's laying a good foundation for our connections. And I think that has been very good. And so progress has been made.
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
So
Thank you. Did you want to add something, Jessica?
yes, very short.
Okay.
Laura, thank you. We talked a lot the other day how much we value the guardianship mentality of our police department. And at the same time, we're willing to look at that continuous improvement. So I just want to review a possible proposed timeline as we begin this work. I'm a visual person. It's going to show what I'm thinking. And so I'm thinking that October to April, we can review our internal practices, research and reconnect with existing social services and ask the questions, what do they do? What do they offer? And what would they need to do more in Oxford? So especially these county-wide agencies, what could we do to build their presence in Oxford? Then from May to July would be to create a recommendation that's what's best for our community. What that recommendation is, I don't know, but I think doing a lot of review first and thinking, then we have a few months to really polish and narrow a recommendation so that right in time for budget season, which is this July, August of next year, it's budget season, we can prepare a budget and adjust a program recommendations as needed to then go forward to council in the September to November timeframe for review. And then if something is adopted, then it can be started in January 2022. I just wanted to share that as like a stage of a possible timeline with the budget season and the flow of what happens in the city, that to me would be a natural process to follow, and also give us time if we're really thinking big about expanding countywide programs, what do they look like? So that's my few cents, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jessica, and Lieutenant Fenning. Thank you. I think what we'll do now is let the Black Lives Matter representatives, Jessica, I don't know if you see them on your screen.
Did you want me to promote them to panelists?
Promote them to panelists so we can see them as they speak. It's so much better than looking at a name while people speak.
Okay. If you are a Black Lives Matter person that would like to speak to issue number 3, please raise your hand so I know who to promote.
Yeah, I asked them to pick out 2 because I
Okay.
20. So I think
It's Shauna Rosenberg and Brandon Humphreys.
Okay.
yeah, they raise their hand. Good.
I'm promoting them both a panelist, and then I will share the PDF, Mr. Mean, that you shared with me.
Okay.
I'll put it up on the screen.
We'll let you know when that we want to put that up. I think they'll let you know. All right.
Okay,
So Shauna and where's Brandon?
Where is Brandon?
Did you hit an A price accidentally? There's Brandon, or at least a picture of him. Okay, Shauna and Brandon, Jessica has a copy of kind of that timeline you sent, or that information about the task force, et cetera. And she's willing to share her screen. So as you speak, people could see that. Now, if you want to wait and talk first and then let her know when you want that shared, just let her know when you're ready to have that shared. So Shauna and Brandon represent Black Lives Matter Oxford. They're part of the group that wrote up these proposals. And so I asked if the group would send a couple representatives to present to the commission sort of what they're thinking, what their vision is, what action steps that they think ought to happen as we decide if we should, make a recommendation to the city to, research and fund alternatives to policing. So I'm going to give it to you, Shannon and Brandon, to go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I want to first just thank the PCRC for inviting us to the table. I think we're really excited to be working with everyone. No matter whether you're a city official or a police officer or a community member, we can all agree that we want Oxford to be a safer, healthier, and more equitable place. And I really hope we can find the common ground to get that done, whatever that looks like. Mr. Mead, as you said, we do have our sort of task force document that lays out what we think a task force to tackle this issue might look like. But you all have access to that, and we can perhaps look at that and talk about that at the end of the meeting. But what I really wanted to do here first is remind everyone of the kinds of changes that we, Black Lives Matter Oxford, sort of envision, and talk about why those changes should be implemented. So basically, we are envisioning, as you all know, a CAHOOTS type program in Oxford. So for the benefit of anyone who's listening who might not be familiar, because I think the PCRC is pretty familiar at this point, CAHOOTS is a program that serves the cities of Eugene and Springfield, Oregon. And it provides a complement and an alternative to traditional policing by allowing medics and medical health experts to respond to emergency calls that don't require someone with a gun, such as mental health crises, calls about people experiencing homelessness, substance misuse, those kinds of issues. And similar programs have existed sometimes for years in other cities, and even in small towns like Alexandria in Kentucky, are hiring social workers to respond to emergency calls. So, this type of proposal isn't some radical idea. And to address some things that were said earlier, this is something that other cities have found a way to make work day or night. This is what we envision for Oxford, right? Emergency responders who don't carry guns and can respond to calls where the use of force isn't required. And these responders could refer people to existing resources so that they can get the help that they need. And of course, if those services are found to be, lacking, either they don't exist or they're sort of insufficiently funded, we hope that the city could also find a way to support those services. And this is a substantial undertaking, which is why we're calling for a resolution to create a task force to investigate how this could work for Oxford, right? We are not expecting all of these changes to be decided on and go into effect right away. So the next question then is sort of why, right? Why do we want the city to investigate a CAHOOTS type program? And I think the uncomfortable truth that we have to face is that Oxford isn't perfect. We have a substance misuse problem. We have community members with mental health issues. We have community members who face housing insecurity or homelessness. And we recognize that the Oxford Police Department is doing what it can and is stepping up to address these issues. But policing simply just isn't a cure-all for all the social issues that Oxford faces. And we know that there is a stigma that's associated with the uniform. So that language that we included about stigma came directly from Chief Jones in a presentation that he gave to City Council. We didn't make that up. And we know that even members of the PCRC, there's a certain stigma there, right? So Dr. Franklin has talked about having problems getting folks of color in the community to have honest conversations with her because she's a member of the PCRC. So I think we should address that stigma does exist, whether we want it to or not. I think that stigma can be, in some cases overcome or reduced, but it's there. You know, and how do we know the people that we aren't reaching, right? It's sort of an unknown unknown. And you know, speaking to the problems that exist in Oxford, you know, this year alone, I've heard numbers like 50 burglaries, 200 thefts, 25 drug-related incidents. And I've been a victim of these sorts of things myself. So 2 years ago, my home was broken into and my car was broken into twice, actually. So I think there are needs that can be addressed better. And there's also a huge amount of public support for these changes. So in addition to the letters of support that we've received from organizations like the Oxford Interfaith Center and the League of Women Voters, we also have a petition going that has over 500 signatures, unique signatures, verified signatures, including official support from the entire Department of Psychology at Miami University. So, you know, you guys will see more about these data when we sort of gather the petition together and send it off to City Council to make it part of the public record. But something like 80% of these petitioners live in Oxford or the surrounding area, and nearly everyone who signed, so all of except like I think 7 people, had some direct connection to the Oxford community. So like I said, you'll hear more about that petition at the next City Council meeting. And so, like I said, we're not asking for these changes to be implemented right away, but we are asking for the PCRC to recommend to City Council officially that a task force be created. And so we did provide you all with an outline of what that might look like. And, you know, we understand what the police department is doing and already doing, and that's wonderful. But let's investigate some more and let's, you know, see what we can do to make Oxford a shining example of what smaller cities, what rural Ohio can look like. So that's what I hope we can focus on here tonight. So that's sort of what I have to say to start with. And so now I'd like to turn things over to Shauna to, you know, in case she has anything else to add to that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I don't have a lot more to add on top of what Brandon has to say. I just wanted to say that it's great to see the timeline that Jessica has put out there. I think that could be a great timeline for a task force that could investigate Cahoots type model, other models, things that are being done in other cities in the area, like Dayton, Ohio. So what I would like to see personally is this great plan for this timeline to figure out, you know, how to integrate social services that are already in existence with what the police department is already doing, with the collaborations that are already being made. Officer Wagers being the community resource officer sounds great. The things that he's doing sound great. And I just wonder if we could take the research that could be done in a task force, have it be melded with all the things that are already being done, and then we could see how the funding would work, just like Jessica said. So I know there's a lot of concern in the community about taking funding away from the police department. But in the end, I think everybody wants the same thing, which is to provide better services for the community. And that includes people of color, that includes Native Americans, that includes the mentally ill, that includes those who have substance abuse disorders. Not everyone does find comfort in a police uniform or a person with a gun coming to their home. I personally have had various incidents over the years involving mental health of my family, and police officers were the responders. I will tell one story in particular. My daughter, my oldest daughter, who at the time was in middle school, was out of control. She was, I ended up needing to call the police because there were no other resources in the area, just as Lieutenant Fenning said. And an officer came, and an officer told me and my husband that we needed to be better parents. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of blame to go around with, social workers or therapists or whatever, saying that same type of thing. But I knew at the time that I did not need that advice. I needed help, and our family did not receive it. And in the end, my daughter actually ended up with a very serious mental illness and hospitalized for over a year. If perhaps we had been able to be connected with the appropriate services a year before that happened, where she was then hospitalized and requiring treatment, perhaps things would have gone better. And I think that that officer with a gun that wanted to tell my husband and I to be better parents, perhaps it would have been better to have an individual that did not have the uniform, that did not have the weapon, that could talk to our family when we were in crisis. So I would like to see all of these things that are already happening come together with an understanding that not every person is going to find comfort in a uniform. Particularly, I want to talk about our student population that is off campus or perhaps lives on campus, but then is in the town. Not all of them come from Oxford. Not all of them are going to find comfort in the history that they may have with an officer, like Lieutenant Fenning said. Some of them may come from locations where there is a poor relationship in their community with police officers. So I think that investigating the idea of having a crisis response team like Cahoots, like something else that might exist out there, would be of benefit of the community to at least look at. And that's all we are currently asking for right now, is that a task force be formed in order to investigate all of these things that are already happening, all the things that could be happening, and how that would benefit the entire community, be inclusive of everyone. So thank you very much.
Jessica, why don't you put up that paper, and I'll talk about it briefly, and then we'll see what members of the PCRRC want to throw in. Well, that's going to be too small. Just unless you can enlarge it, I don't think it'll be helpful.
I have two screens, so
You
it
should
looks
be able to enlarge it.
That's okay. I can speak
Yeah,
to it.
she can enlarge it. There it goes.
How's that?
That's
That big
good.
enough? And then I can just,
There you go. Yeah, you can scroll down, and you can scroll down to, I think the first part is basically that the proposal is to set up a task force. And the task force is to investigate alternatives to policing, basically what people have talked about, even Lieutenant Fenning talking about a counselor going around with officer wagers. That's kind of an alternative approach to policing. And I think what Brandon and Shauna were talking about is situations that needed a response, not necessarily a police response, but as Lieutenant Fenning pointed out, being up here in this corner of the county, we are not near a lot of the resources to get help, particularly after hours. So their proposal, and for people who are in attendance, hopefully you can see this, is to make up a task force and have representatives from local organizations and commissions, officers, people in the field, people with social work and police reform and police experience. And I think so their idea is that, and I think Jessica was sort of saying the same thing. To me, almost everyone's saying the same thing, is to spend some time investigating, researching issues we have in Oxford and possible resources we have to help deal with those issues. They have a 6-month turnaround. Jessica had a longer turnaround. I think hers was based on the fact that she understands the budget process in the city. And if things are going to take place, hiring a couple social workers, it would have to probably happen at budget time. And then if you scroll up just a little, Jessica, they talk about some of the things that need to be researched, different areas, racial discrimination, mental health, substance abuse, some of the things that have been talked about tonight. They talk about ways to get community buy-in by having town hall type meetings so people can give input. And then they talk about doing review of literature and review in other places. So I think you can take that down, Jessica.
And then we have Ms. DeLong has her raised hand. Ms. DeLong, go ahead.
Yeah.
Initially, my objection is to the term alternatives to policing. I think language like augmentation might be more inclusive, since that's what we're after. And I'm curious to know what this group has already researched and investigated about existing policies, procedures, and situations. I mean, I'm reading the same thing you are, but what research has already been done? How much investigation into current procedures has already been completed?
Go ahead, Shauna.
So actually, she's not been made a panelist, but Sharon Custer of the Family and Social Work Department actually was joining us tonight. As she had said earlier, we have kind of been in a work group, Black Lives Matter members and Family and Social Work. And she actually has done some research into what is already available through the county crisis response there. So maybe, so Sharon has some information that perhaps we could hear from, but I would like to say that aside from the research that we have already done in relation to the proposals as written, we have not done the work of a task force. That's why we're asking for the creation of a task force. This is not research that we have already done, because first of all, we're not even the most qualified people to do that research. Family and Social Work has said that graduate students in their department are willing to do a literature review. There are people in the community. I approached a member of the NAACP who is an active member who would love to be on a task. I also talk with my hands, Lieutenant Fenning, who would also like to be on a task force and provide her voice as a person of color and a member of the NAACP. So it's not that I'm fighting against what's already going on. I would like to augment, that's a great word. I would like a task force to be created to augment the research and the activities that are already happening.
Sharon, did you want to add something real quickly?
Yes. So I want to thank Lieutenant Fenning, because I think you highlighted a lot of what we've already found, right? That there's a lot going on. I had a really nice talk with Amy Masechko with the Coalition for Healthy Community. And when she was sharing some of the great things that they've been working on in conjunction around mental health and working with the department. And then also, this big grant that the Butler County Mental Health Board just received that is designated toward Oxford to help with substance use in particular and prevention. And so there's a lot that we know is happening. The question is, are we being strategic in collaborating with all of these people? And so if we have resources and passions and there's voices that aren't at the table, and the coalition has passion and their voices, and the goal would be to merge all of those voices together to really do just a more thorough needs assessment to figure out what's happening. I think the other thing that was a big aha for a lot of people is there is a lot out there, but maybe it's more of an awareness campaign. Are we underutilizing the Butler County Crisis Line? Maybe if they were able to respond to Shanna's situation, her family would have been in a different situation, but she didn't even know they existed at the time. MRSS is new to the county, and that could be a great resource for families. Handle with Care is going to be happening soon if COVID ever subsides a little bit more, right? So there's a lot already happening. We just want to make sure that we're putting all of those pieces together and then figuring out where the gaps are and making recommendations based on those gaps rather than haphazard assumptions about what should or shouldn't be happening.
And then Mr. Mead, we have Lieutenant Robinson's hand is raised.
Okay,
Yes, just to add what Sharon said, one of the things that that I did prior to my current position, well, I mean, while I was serving as a police officer, but one of the things I've done in the community is I served on the Family Resource Board for almost 8 years. And one of the things that we saw was the devolving of social services in the Oxford community, whether that be moving to Hamilton, relocating to Middletown, or agencies splitting up because of whether it be a workload that's not available to necessitate people always here in Oxford, offices always here in Oxford. Whatever the reason was, we did see those resources leave our town. And one of the things I would love to see happen, especially now that I'm hearing this from other people that, hey, there's other options out there. I would love to see some of the pressure put on those agencies to come back. Everybody here in this town is paying taxes that support those agencies countywide. So those county resources need to be here in town. And whether that be dedicated time in town or dedicated resources here in town, I would love to see the pressure come from political entities such as yourself through the city council to push for those things to come back here to town. So just a little bit of 2 cents, not much else there that I want to add other than we do have things out there that I think can be pushed to come back to provide those services here in the Oxford community. So thank you.
okay. I think now I think it means here now all 7 members here. If the members of the commission want to pipe up and, ask questions of people that are here with us and or give your thoughts on this matter of what you think we as a commission ought to do. As I said before, I think this is a bigger issue than policing. It's sort of like, how do we as a community approach issues in our community? And then how do we send the right people to deal with the right problems? And that would be reallocating, but actually finding resources to deal with problems correctly. So if anybody on the commission wants to pipe in now, please, we'll listen to your input. It's a quiet group.
I speak a lot. I was being quiet to see if maybe somebody else was willing to speak first. So I appreciate the input from everybody, from Lieutenant Fenning, from Brandon and Shauna, Sharon, and as well as Lieutenant Robinson. I don't see this this proposal to form a task force as being counter to anything that the good work that OPD is already doing. I see it as complementary in many ways. And as I was looking at different documents, I was looking at the Ohio Collaborative standards. And the Ohio Collaborative is this statewide collaborative that was created by then Governor Kasich, which our police, as many other police agencies, have certification with. And they need to meet a certain number of standards. And there's a policy statement for the state of Ohio on the standard for community engagement. And it's not that long, but I would like to read it. Under purpose, it says, it is the shared responsibility of law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve to work together to build relationships based upon trust and mutual respect. A strong relationship between law enforcement agencies and the community will improve public safety and allow communities to thrive and prosper. And this is the standard. The standard is agencies must adopt a community engagement strategy with a primary focus on improving police-community relations. And then they have a commentary to supplement the standard. It says agencies shall utilize proven strategies. And that's where I think research from the Department of Family Science and Social Work, research from a task force, should it be put together. It says agencies shall utilize proven strategies or develop their own strategies that are focused on community engagement. Strategies may address any or all of the following or other related areas: youth programs, educating the community on police policy and procedures, understanding the communities agencies serve, sharing, receiving, and providing information to the public, jointly identifying areas of concern, and communicating when appropriate significant changes in agency operations. The intent of this standard is to establish agency accountability for the community involvement function in writing, and the function should be developed and operated to effectively.
Sorry.
The function should be developed and operated to effectively meet the needs of the agency with consideration of the department size and budget, as well as the community it serves. So I don't see the formation of the task force as being counter to what the Ohio Collaborative has put forth. One of the things that I've been reflecting on is the fact that for a small town, we have a lot of different Oxfords, right? The reality of living in Oxford, if you live in Southern Knolls, where I am, is different than the reality of living in Oxford if you live in Parkview Arms or the mobile home community. And I see this as an opportunity for all of these different parts of Oxford to come together and to solve problems in a systems sort of way. And I know Lieutenant Robinson, and it would be great if you could share something about this, but you had gone to groundwater training that was offered through, I forget the name of the agency, but it's the Racial Equity Institute. And they were talking about racial justice and systems. How do you see what you learned in that workshop fitting into this concept of working together as a community?
You know, one of the things that struck me about that training, and it was the Montgomery County Mental Health Board that put that on, and they're a very, very strong mental health board that has supported, I think, even some of our CIT training in the past, maybe mental health first aid, and we've relied on them for many trainings here in Butler County. But the one thing that caught me maybe the most profoundly was this notion that, you know, one or two things that exist in your community, or one or two things that exist in a group may go unnoticed. But as many things start appearing and you start seeing these problems spreading out, kind of the broken windows theory, if you tie it to a police research theory, you get into the broken windows where suddenly we start noticing more and more, then it becomes okay. Well, in the groundwater approach, we start seeing one or two things happen, and the more and more call it activities. It could be a bad activity, it could be a bad experience, it could be some type of engagement with somebody. But the more and more that those happen, it starts to taint the rest of the pool. And so you might have a bad experience with some activity that occurred on College Corner Pike, and if that happens, that can spread if gone unnoticed until suddenly the entire what we would call District 4 here in Oxford, which is the entire northwest quadrant of the city, becomes affected by that, and then that becomes the norm. So it's trying to address those things before it becomes some larger scale issue, and realizing that if we catch some things early enough, it's not that those bad experiences, bad activities aren't able to spread to an entire community.
Thank you. That sounds a little different than, I'm just going to pull up from the weekly police report what I read about that. Yeah, it says Lieutenant Robinson attended training hosted by the Montgomery County Addiction and Mental Health Services titled Groundwater Approach to Racial Equity. And then it says the groundwater metaphor was designed to help practitioners at all levels internalize the reality that we live in a racially structured society, and that is what causes racial inequity.
Right. There was a bit, the racial component is how this was founded, but they were really big in the metaphor, and that was from the police world. They didn't touch on policing very much. So I was trying to tie that back to how does that tie into what we do as police officers. It was really getting that metaphor of the groundwater, of things. You know, I remember the fish. You know, we have one fish and we think that the fish in the pond, there's nothing wrong, but suddenly many fish start appearing in the pond. Then that taints the entire issue. And maybe it's not the fish that are wrong, it's the things leading into the pond that cause that cause that issue. And that's that undetected things that kind of come into our overall approach, or the water source, so to speak, that cause that racism or cause the other problems in a community. So kind of more holistic as we went through that class, but certainly talking about those undetected things, how they leach in and can change a pond or change a source, so to speak.
Yeah, and I know, I'm sorry, I caught you off guard with that, but I had been wanting to ask you about it. I just did a little Google just for people to know what we're talking about here. The Racial Equity Institute, you know, our officers do a lot of diversity training. And I truly believe that when they do this training, it's not just to check a box for certification, but that they desire to apply what they've learned at these trainings to the community. And so I was looking at the weekly police report where they tell us, so OPD tells those of us on the police commission kind of what trainings they're doing. I know there was a recent training with Dr. Rodney Coates that many people are familiar with that I was able to watch the video for. But the groundwater approach, it's a metaphor, as Lieutenant Robinson said, which is designed to help practitioners at all levels internalize the reality that we live in a racially structured society, that is what causes racial inequity. And then it says the metaphor is based on 3 observations. Number 1, racial inequity looks the same across systems. Number 2, socioeconomic differences do not explain the racial inequity. And then number 3, inequities are caused by systems regardless of people's culture or behavior. And so this is really good training. And I think that when I look at the task force does involve the inclusion of people from OPD as well as other stakeholders. And I think that the knowledge that's being gained from these diversity trainings could really help support the mission of the task force. The only other thing, well, I probably have other things, but I want to let other people speak. But with regard to the idea of the policing and the stigma of the uniform, and Brandon responded to the fact that, you know, Chief Jones had recognized that for some people it is stigmatizing to have someone in a uniform show up. But another thing that struck me in a presentation Chief Jones did to City Council about training, he talked about the use of force policy. And he talked about the different levels of force. And one of the levels he mentioned as the lowest level was verbal force, right? Verbal commands. Then there's display of force and use of force and deadly force. But then he kind of backtracked and said, even before the verbal force, actually, the police officer's physical presence in the uniform is like the lowest level of force, even before verbal force. And so I think that that's probably what's being alluded to, is the idea that for some people, as Shauna mentioned, depending on our background with policing, I know some people say, why would you be nervous around an officer if you're not doing anything wrong? But I think as Chief Jones acknowledged, the uniform and the presence is a very, very low level type of force. And that's a word that he used. And I think that's one of the concerns people have when they say, what are ways that we can find complements, alternatives to police officers showing up in cases where perhaps the threat of violence isn't necessarily warranted. But I'd like to hear from other members of the commission. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else on the commission want to pipe in? Unmute yourself and go ahead, Egon.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I want to understand more regarding this is, you know, I need to understand or quantify the issues that we're talking about. So, what is the volume of problems? So, you know, we're talking about homelessness, drug addiction, and so on. You know, I was doing some research, and, you know, the Family Resource Center, I think the 2017 is the latest I found on their website, that we have about 80 households that, you know, that are considered homeless. You know, that's 2017 data. I don't know what the current data is. I don't know what the volume of calls that are fielded by our police department are regarding homelessness. sorry, I'm getting a call. Also don't know, drug addiction and so on. I am not sure, what the volume is, how much time, or how much, what the volume is, what the percentage volume is. We do see some of these, weekly reports, and I try to more or less map where some of these would land, and it was not very clear to me. So, on that aspect, I don't know what the what the quantity or the volume of the said problems are, and I mean, if it is a problem, then okay, then we can definitely start talking about it. But if there's not, then I mean, why fix what's not broken? That's what I want to say. Other things that the other thing that I want to look at is and I think Lieutenant Robinson touched on it, is I looked up the Butler County Mental Health, and again, their annual report is a bit outdated. It goes back to 2018. That's the latest one they have. They don't have 2019 yet. I'm assuming because of COVID. But that being said, our population here in Oxford represents about 6% of the Butler County population, and that is without students. And yet they claim to have served 28,000, roughly 28,257 individuals through services, 3% of which were from Oxford. So my question is, are we being, according to this, are we being underserved based on our proportion of population? Or is it that the need is just not there compared to other places like Hamilton, which receive 43% or serve represents 43% of the people served, or Middletown, which represents 23% of the people served? So it does. I would imagine that yes, we are in Oxford. I've driven through Middletown. I've driven through Hamilton. It's very different. We do have a need here. I'm assuming for social services. We do have a need. I mean, that's no lie. I mean, and one of the things, it has been an issue for a long time, that here in Oxford we need affordable housing. So that's something that needs to be addressed, I think, and I think and council, city council does know that and understand that. But I think we do need to push our social services to that we are paying into through our levy dollars to have a greater representation in the Oxford community. Because we also pay into MRDD, children's services, and elderly services. So I think I worked 4 years in elderly services doing outcomes and business intelligence, and I know that Oxford was one of our smaller markets, despite having a large representation in Southwest Ohio. At any rate, so those are 2 points that I want to make. Just listening to, or looking into the Cahoots program, and I did some research into Cahoots, and I also, looked at some of these, the other proposals, and it sounds like, it kind of sounds like to me that, the goal of this is to have a city-funded social services program. I'm not sure, again, we gotta, I think it's more important for us to leverage what it's already out there. And I think Lieutenant Fanning, she's already touched on some of those topics. And, she wants to, she's looking into engaging, homeless, shelters, all sorts of social service programs. So I think that's a good, definitely a good start. But I do also want to say that this is something that the department has been doing for a while. I last year, when I signed on to this commission, I enrolled to the Citizens Police Academy. I recommend everybody does that. The Citizens Police Academy is a 13-week program, just about 1 hour a week, in the evenings, and they go through every single aspect of the police department, from parking enforcement, animal control, all the way to undercover units, drug, undercover units. They even went into undercover, the discussion, posing as bouncers at a bar to look for fake IDs. The K9 unit, Roscoe, the dog is fantastic dog. I wish I had one just like it. But one of they also, they also had a presentation from the Heroin Hope Line. The Heroin Hope Line, again, at the time, I think Lieutenant Fennig mentioned that, they have since dropped the heroin because, it's not a big issue anymore. But it is something that back then, last year, before, this, the whole conversation that we're having now was, that big of a conversation. This is something that the department was already doing. Every single, individual in Oxford that, what is it, that had an addiction and had an overdose, they were automatically referred by the police department to the Heroin Hope Line. The Heroin Hope Line would engage that person in the hospital or, at the county jail or pretty much anything, and engage them and just sign them up to service. I had a pretty good discussion with the lady because at the time I was, in the heroin task force for my company, which is a mental, not a mental health, it's a healthcare insurance provider. So, the thing is, this department, I think, is, has been doing a pretty good job as it is before, being nudged by BLM. And I think they're taking the right steps. And again, I don't know how to quantify this problem. I don't think this has been quantified. And so I would like, before, before talking about, forming a whole task force and everything like that, I would like to know what that volume is, and would it warrant to have, a 24-hour social service crisis intervention type, personnel. So, and that's just my point. I think the department is doing a fantastic job right now. They've always been open and honest with us, and so, I think, I want to go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's all I have to say.
And I'm wondering if you see, when you talk about wanting to see some more data, I think that's something that the task force can actually help with, right? That's
yeah. I mean, definitely that's something. Well, I mean, I don't know if we need a task force to come up with that data. I think that or the full-blown task force that includes, let me see, I was looking, a bunch of community members, let me look it up. There was at least 7 people in that task force. I don't think this is something that we need 7 people, including social work experts and police experts and all sorts of experts. This is something that we can come up with. We just need to some of the data from a few folks to quantify, to map what those calls look like. Well, the scope of the problem in town and what the scope it is on the burden to police calls or dispatch calls. So,
Shauna, did you want to?
I just wanted to say some of this data is pretty easily accessible, just as Egon says. I'm actually on the Housing Advisory Commission. We're currently working on or thinking about helping with a homeless shelter. We are definitely talking about the homelessness issue in almost every one of our meetings. I was part of what I was doing was looking for an email actually from Nicola Rodriguez at the FRC. Somewhere in my email is the actual number for homeless families as it stands now, but I couldn't find that email quickly enough. So a lot of this information is really easily accessible and out there. And as Egon says, we know things are happening. We know things are being worked on. I guess my concern is I see Jessica's suggested timeline for work with the department and the city. I just want to make sure that there is representation from the community. Okay, so when we talk about a task force, we're not trying to create additional work. It sounds like members of the city staff or the police department are already doing the work that would be beneficial to a task force. What we want to see, though, is that this is not done without community members. As I said, I did talk to an active member of the NAACP who is willing to be on the task force. I did an accounting today of all of the different police reform forums and events that have happened since the murder of George Floyd. There have been many, and there's been a lot of involvement. You know, the League of Women Voters had a community forum that Dr. Franklin and Pat Mead were present at, along with Chief Jones and Nicole Newsom, who is the co-leader of Black Lives Matter. So there is interest in the community in being a part of this decision making. So it's not that, so once again, I'm not against anything at all that's happening now. It sounds wonderful. I just want to make sure that all of the people that care about this can be involved.
Yeah, Brandon.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Shauna just said about community input. So, you know, I've attended these PCRC meetings for several meetings now, and I hear Mr. Cron talk about you know, wanting data. And you know, I'm a psychologist, and that's you know, I do quantitative work. I very much value quantitative data. At the same time, though, we have to be, I think, concerned about what our data sources are and whether those sources are complete. You know, do the statistics represent the whole picture? You know, so for example, if you look at you know, racial disparities in policing, you know, we know, you know, there's the phrase garbage in, garbage out in terms of data analysis, right? You know, there can be prejudices or issues or incompleteness in the data, in the quantitative data. And that is why I think it's so important to engage with the community as well. And I think, you know, should a task force be created, I hope that the members of that task force or, you know, city council in designing the task force would be very, very careful and very thoughtful about, you know, how to solicit that community input. Because we know that, right, like even these PCRC meetings aren't well attended by people who are affected by, you know, policing procedures and things like that. So yeah, so I just wanted to underscore the idea that I think it's very important to look at the data. And I think that's something a task force can do. And I think the task force should also collect that more qualitative data from community members. So.
Hannah, did you have something? Okay, I thought so.
I was just going to add in that people aren't numbers. I think having some of that quantitative data is going to be helpful, but it is very important because we as humans live very subjective lives. We don't fit into boxes. We don't behave in the same standardized ways that quantitative data is measuring, right? And so we have a lot of things that have been mentioned today that are obvious issues that are happening that are not going to show up in some of those stats. And so that's why I think people's voices should be reflected. And if a task force is formed, I would second what has been said about being very intentional about eliciting some of those voices. So can I share my feedback on some of the other things now?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think whenever we get the minutes for this meeting, we're already going to see that we've identified several issues. For example, there aren't enough services after hours, as Lieutenant Fenning said. Let's see. there's just a lot of needs that have been identified that need to be met. Having a task force is going to kind of supplement and show proof with supplemental data to solidify, yes, we know that this is a problem. So I also want to raise the question of, we do need to address what is happening here. And I think that's the beauty of what this task force can do, as Sharon Custer said, is at the end of the day, if it ends up being an awareness campaign, isn't that good for what Oxford needs based on what Oxford citizens have decided? So I want to support that. But my larger question is, can we also do this in a way where we are recognizing that there are also larger systems at work that influence Oxford? This is not just an individual, let's figure out what's happening in Oxford, but there are larger conversations that are happening about mental health issues, about substance use, about policing that have nothing to do with individual actions taken. And some of those things are going to continue to reinforce as well as maintain some of these social problems. We could do all of this work, but still at the end of the day, we are influenced by some of those larger systems, and we have national millions of people saying this is a problem. This is not an individual issue. There are many, many people who have marginalized experiences that have said, we have experienced this for centuries. So I want us to remember that we need to have this task force. We need to figure out what are the needs of the community. But we also need to think about what is the sustainability of whatever we're trying to accomplish as determined by the needs that we've identified. And I also think that, I mean, as radical as I want to believe I am, and despite wanting to imagine a better future, we know that this is actually a pretty natural process of being involved in identifying what are the needs of the community, because these needs will change over time. So it is absolutely important that we are doing this right now, and we will probably have to do this again in several years for whoever is still remaining here in Oxford. So I kind of want to normalize that. And related to sustainability of whatever happens in the future is this idea of accountability. This is a college town. We do need to rely on members, and that's us, being that kind of accountability to say, if we have this system in place that we've designed, how are we going to maintain that? So if that's a community resource officer, if that's whatever social service person, all of us have a responsibility, a democratic responsibility to ensure that the needs of our community members are met. And if they're not, that's on us. That's not an individual person, that person that we hired over there is going to take care of that. That's on all of us. I don't know if I had any other questions, but that's kind of what I wanted to say. I think that having a task force is essential, and I'm on board with that. And I don't think that the mere existence of a task force should feel threatening. I think it offers a lot of hope. It shows that we're invested in our community.
Okay, there's a couple commission members we haven't heard from. If they want to pipe in and share their thoughts, be nice to hear from everybody.
Mr. Bean, did you want to accept any other public comment? Yes or no?
Not right now. I want to make sure all the commission members get to speak.
Yeah, Pat.
Yeah.
I guess my feeling, to cut through things a little bit from my standpoint at least, is going back to something that Amber said, even the term Ohio Collaborative, which where I've heard that before, has been in the context of driving some of the data collection that in fact, I think started in January and that constituted BLM Oxford's first recommendation. So to me, that works very nicely. But the whole idea of being collaborative is I like a great deal. The idea of community involvement and having interested, concerned citizens working with members of the police force or others who are in a position to weigh in meaningfully on Oxford's situation. I think, we have a good town. It doesn't mean it's perfect. And I think that having concerns raised and addressed, this is a very complex issue, the way the third proposal was put, because I nobody's used the terms, but I mean, it really was very broadly based. And as a result, I'm aware of communication on social media, people, the question of what does it mean to defund the police? And there were people concerned that somehow we would suggest doing something drastic with the police, which I don't see. But I also think there are some concerns that have been raised by members of the community that maybe people don't feel free always to voice concerns, that there may be some issues that having some way to get at them and make the community better would be good. And ultimately, in my opinion, when you allow open communication, you probably address a lot of the concerns just by the act of having that open communication. So to me, it's more of a qualitative than a quantitative issue, not how many cases, whether it's of substance abuse or other things are occurring, but the question of how, as a community, do we deal with those things to help those individuals, but also to keep the community safe, to keep the police safe, to look at everyone. And so I really do think when you call it a task force, it sounds very formal and official. It is. But I think that having dialogue among people who are interested and concerned and can share their perspectives. Some of them are practical issues, whether it's dollars and cents or whether it's covering hours in the day. And some are more not philosophical, because they really do play out in important ways, but more a function of what can or should we do if practical matters like money weren't a concern, to promote safety and a collaborative spirit within our town at the same time. So I guess from what I've heard, it doesn't seem radical to me to have some type of group that gives voice to those who want to have it, and without judging in any fashion what that might lead to. I think that's putting the cart before the horse, but I think I support the notion. I'll just stop there. I think I strongly support the notion.
All right, thank you, Larry. Yes, Egon. Okay, go ahead, Hannah. Sorry.
I just had a question of, if a task force was formed, would we be able to have a report, like a physical document saying, this is what the community has identified, here are the issues? That's just my question.
That would be an assumption I would have. Yes, Egon.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was muted. Yeah, no. So, what I want to know is, like, so, I already mentioned that in 2017, we, according to the Family Resource Center, we had about 80 households who were homeless. I don't know what it is right now. I would imagine because of the shutdowns and Corona that it's probably, a bit more. Or that population has grown. So I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't a problem. However, one of the things that we're talking about different police, strategies, different police structures, cahoots type models or something like that. So those are two things. One of them is, there is a problem is, and maybe the police is not the right people to solve that problem, because they're not going to show up unless they get called, right? So what's the volume of calls that would fit that description? Because I mean, if they only get an average of 2 calls a month that would meet that criteria, then I think there's I don't think there's going to be any way to any need to look further into cahoots type model. If it's more than that, then maybe start looking at something different, for sure. But I mean, I would like, for example, I would actually want to propose, before making a recommendation to form this whole this whole thing, and having the different research phases, including reimagining police and everything, to get the scope of the problem. I mean, we've I think Shauna mentioned that the collecting the data may not be that difficult. I think we have dispatch calls by category that we could definitely look into, and I think we should identify that there is actually a problem that could be solved this way, before just going on and establishing a 6-month plan for everything. And I think that could be done rather quickly. That's just my thought.
Before you speak, Brandon, Amin or Deirdre, did you want to add anything in?
I apologize that I was not able to attend the entire meeting, and it's overlapped with the class I'm teaching. And although I made arrangement and tried to be able to audit, but there's so many questions from students today because they were having an exam tomorrow in one class and something else, like the project in another class. So I was just heard some of the discussion. I do not have a complete picture. But I just want to address a few things that I've heard. And one is the data collection part. And, I, just like many other professors, we do lots of data collections. We understand the scope of those activities. And I, when I do my research, I collect as much data as possible, and because I want to have a complete picture. I have expressed that a few times, although not very strongly, but I heard that there's the reaction basically is that there's so many data to be collected. It's the police has already been burdened, and they have so many data already. And when I saw the report, I did see that part. And for the people who are not really trained completely just for collecting the data, I can see there's a potential issue. Or so I understand it both ways. And that's one item that I see, heard that has been discussed today. And so the other few things, I also understand, I understand the situation from both sides, and I heard both, and I don't have a strong feeling of doing it one way or another. And I guess I just need to hear more and learn more about it before I can have a very strong feeling on what should be done.
Deirdre, did you want to add anything?
I'm like everybody else, I can't figure out the unmute. No, I appreciate everyone's comments. I'm interested to hear everyone's perspective. I do think we are focusing a lot of attention on that social services element, which even though the day-to-day execution of a police officer's job in keeping the peace and fixing people's problems does tiptoe into that social services world, that is that's not the primary focus of law enforcement. So while this is all great, and I wish that the overworked, underpaid, underfunded social systems were 24/7 and we all had unlimited access to them, I'm not 100% sure that that's the purview of the police department. And some discussion was had about the ordinance and the difference between what is spelled out as our function and what our function really could be. And I apologize that I don't remember who said it, but it resonated that the education component, we, in addition to making recommendations, this board should also be advocates for our police department, advocates within the community, building those bridges, building those connections, because for some, the only contact they've had with the police department is when they either committed a crime or were the survivor of a crime. And those are both very stressful situations. So I think we could be doing a lot more. And if this commission decides that part of that education component is greater accessibility to us, then that I'm on board with. Thank you.
So Deirdre, can you clarify? I'm not sure whether what you're saying is that we should be the contact and there shouldn't be a task force, or are you against the task force formation?
I'm not against a task force formation, but I think the mission of that task force should be pretty clear. And if it is a desire to revamp the way not just Oxford, but Butler County accesses social services, I think that may be beyond our purview.
Okay. I think we had one person raise their hand, and then I'll see if we can wrap this up and see where we want to go. So Jessica, it is okay with me, since there was only one person who wanted to add something in from the community. I think it's okay to hear from the community again.
Okay. Jill, I don't have your last name. Jill, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can.
Okay, sorry, you can't tell on the phone that I'm using. I just wanted to jump in and say that I have been working with a gal in the area of Oxford. I live a little bit outside the area. However, my daughter works full time there. And I frequent the Oxford area a lot for shopping and eating and so forth. I've been involved also with the coalition for the police to keep it as it is, and the petition that has circulated and also been given by Debbie Anderson to City Council. Some things that I want to just mention, a little bit about me. I live in Liberty, and I also am a former cruise crew member for the cruise campaign during the 2016 election year. With regards to this issue, I've heard some things tonight, and I'm glad you took us later in the evening. The task force versus the homeless shelter. I didn't hear anything at all referencing that there is a homeless shelter in the city of Hamilton that, perhaps rather than taking from a police budget, that something along the lines of the city funds or through the CARES Act, something along that line, there could be room for something by way of a homeless shelter within the city of Oxford if there's 80 families that would be in need at this point, or maybe more. I would like to ask that you not take a vote on this evening, and the reason being that I believe that everyone should take some time and do some research and some studying on critical race theory, which is something that I understand has been, not that it's happening in Miami, but that there are a number of universities nationwide that are teaching this within their college structure and curriculum. And it directly relates to the comments. I attended the League of Women Voters meeting virtually, and there was a reference made by the Black Lives Matter representative, Nicole, that we are living in a white supremacist nation. And I would definitely like to argue that point. As a daughter of the American Revolution, I have 3 grandfathers buried in Cincinnati who all served. So my family goes back prior to the formation of this country. And I would like to even point out to those who believe that we are a white supremacist nation that, you know, Vermont was the first to abolish slavery as of 1777, 1 year after our
Okay,
nation.
Jill, Jessica, help me out. Jill, you're kind of off topic. Do you have a suggestion about the task force? I really don't want this meeting to dissolve into a discussion on race theory. We can have another meeting about that with another group. We're here to discuss the third proposal, which is about a task force. So if you can address that, please do. And if not, I'm going to ask Jessica to mute you and see if people want to address the issue at hand. Not that your discussion is not important at some time, someplace, just not right now. Thank you.
Okay, well, the only other thing that I might add before I'm muted would be that I think that there's also a need to really take a look at the opposite side of this from the police, and that's the people that are actually, you know, they're seeing all the time. You know, the statistics that I found on the city website for the year of 2019 referenced race and what if there was an arrest, what was made, and so forth. And I just think that people need to also think in terms of the respect for the authority of the police. So the task force, I'm not in favor of it. I think that the police should be left as it is, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thank you for.
Okay.
I went ahead and turned her off then. Mr. Mead, we had quite a few hands raised.
Yeah, I probably opened Pandora's box by doing this. So how many is quite a few? Because if we're going,
we have 3 more hands raised.
All right, I would ask people to do this. If you have a comment about the task force, please feel free to add a public comment here. If you have a comment about something that's not on the agenda, we'll save it for another meeting when it is on the agenda.
Okay.
So with those parameters, Jessica, hopefully we don't have to mute anybody.
Right. Well, Mr. Bracken, go ahead.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for hearing the public at the end, even though I know you're running long. I'll try and keep it quick. I just wanted to say that I sort of agree with the idea that, you know, social issues, mental issues are sort of out of the purview of the police, but that's sort of the point of the task force. It's not just about addressing these things on the front end, which I think is great, but is sort of a separate matter, but addressing it on the back end, that if there's an issue in which there's not a significant threat of violence, it would be great if we had somebody who didn't have a gun and a threat of violence and a position of sort of forceful authority handling that. And a lot of that isn't even just social and mental issues. That's like, you know, is there a loose dog? Is a police officer having to open a locked door for a car or a home, or any number of things that just doesn't require someone who has the potential to enact force. And so I think that's one of the issues. And another one of the things I wanted to mention quickly was sometimes it's spoken about as if these programs are a burden on cities and resources. But the evidence that I've seen on several different programs, including Cahoots especially, is that it actually reduces resources in many ways and reduces the cost in many ways and improves community relations because, you have less community conflict, you have less chance for lawsuits, you have less chance for a physical violent interaction if you're only bringing out people of authority with weapons and use of authority when they're actually needed there. So I think I wanted to point that out, that this is hopefully beneficial in all the ways that we care about. Thank you.
And how could my question about that, how do you know what situation is going to be violent and what situation is not? When
Oh,
they
I'm sorry. I didn't know we were
confirm-
having a conversation right now about this.
I'm going to go ahead. We're going to move on, if we could, to the next comment. Thank you. I believe this might be, well, I have maybe Chantel Ray. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I didn't change my name. It's Chantal Ragu. I wanted to follow up on, I totally agree with what Ms. DeLong said about, she had said that it is not within the police's purview to, I think she was talking about mental health or homelessness. I totally agree with that. And I think that's something that I see as a common thread between what everyone is saying, that there's a need for having the police for dangerous situations and for detective work, but there might be other situations that do not fall under the purview of the police. So it's making space for social workers that are trained for mental health illness, we have an ability to handle the homelessness problem. We have an ability to handle domestic violence in a way that I have to imagine, I can't wait to see the numbers. I have to imagine that domestic violence must be some of the most dangerous things that the Oxford Police has to face. And so in those situations of having social workers that are trained in domestic violence to respond to those and to try to figure out a way that we aren't constantly reacting to these problems that I know that the police have to deal with them over and over again. It's the same people calling. So what can we do to try to fix the root causes of issues? Because in the end, there's a lot of mental health problems and there's a lot of problems with poverty. So if we can try to be a little bit more proactive about what we're issuing or what we're, how we're utilizing the police, I think makes a whole lot of sense. And I liken this to whenever I see our parking attendants driving around, they are not police officers. Am I wrong? Or do they carry a gun? So it's just like that separation of duties. There's an animal warden in some places that do not carry guns. There are parking attendants in our city of Oxford that are not carrying guns, and that so it's trying to delineate what is within the purview of the police and what is not. And I think that's I totally agree with you, Ms. DeLong, that these issues are not within the purview of the police, and that we can be more proactive to trying to fix the root cause. And my general opinion about task force and investigation and data collection is that if you are against it, I don't know what situation you want less transparency or less discussion. There is always room for learning something, talking, reaching out to people. I have no idea what you have to hide by not having a task force to just have a discussion and look into this further. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we have Ms. Cummins.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Then we'll stop.
Good evening. I just wanted to say that I agree with forming the task force. I don't think it can hurt anything. I think having the police be a part of the task force is important, but I don't think that we can say, let's have the police do this and let them look into it and let them make the decision, because what happens, whether it's valid or not, people feel like there's not transparency because you have the people who you're wondering about looking at themselves and then telling you what they've determined they need for themselves. So the task force allows the community to be involved. It allows the transparency to occur. And then a good and wise decision and recommendations can be made. So I just think that we have to look at this as, this is a community recommendation. This is a community task force. It's the same way back in the day when the Housing Advisory Commission was formed. We had to form a Housing Advisory Task Force to recommend a Housing Advisory Commission. But we all know over the years, and I've got some experience in law enforcement. Laura and I go way back. And I've had a lot of experience in law enforcement in various arenas as an officer in administration and in other areas of policing. And police work has grown into being the catch-all for a number of things: a dog in the tree, a child who's sick, a mentally disturbed person, an overdose person. They've become a whole lot of things, and we appreciate all that they do. But if we can allow somebody to partner with them and people to be available that have expertise that can help to alleviate the pressure on those officers and allow the people in need to get the help that they need in a more effective and efficient and safe way, I think it's a win-win situation. So I'm strongly in favor of the task force, and I appreciate all that you all are doing this evening, Black Lives Matter and the advisory, to all of you all for what you're doing. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I know when I first got on the commission, I did a ride along. I don't remember which officer I was with. And the first stop was at Parkview Arms for a domestic dispute. I happen to know the people because I, at that time, worked a lot with people in Parkview Arms. The second stop was along the railroad track looking for a suicidal college student. The third stop was in front of one of the bars because some young man was sort of having a mental breakdown. And I remember my comment to the police officer, wow, you need a social worker here. Now that was probably 5 years ago. But it amazed me how much police work is dealing with individuals who are in crises, and police officers with all their training and all the extra stuff they do could probably sometimes use a hand. And as I listened to tonight's discussion, you know, to me, Lieutenant Fenning and Deirdre, who has police experience, sort of reinforced that we are asking our police to do a lot of things. Now, the Black Lives Matter group has come forward with this proposal. And I don't think, Egon, we have to worry about it being a taxpayer funded thing. It seems to me the taxpayers are already funding this. We have a counselor now driving around with Matt Wagers. We have Matt Wagers' job description being changed. We have things going on. Obviously, the city of Oxford, the taxpayers are supporting some of this mental health social work thing. We're just doing it through the police department without really giving the police department all the resources and expertise they need, as good as they are at what they do. So the proposal tonight I see is, and Deirdre, I think we're going to stick with the word alternatives. Though the alternatives augment what the police do, I think, and it doesn't mean the alternatives are totally separate with them. Depends on where the task force goes with it. But so I think the proposal is to recommend to the city administration and city council to form a task force to research and fund alternatives to policing. And then where that task force goes, you know, we aren't sure of yet, but just to propose to the city and city council that that be done. I think we've had enough input. I think the 7 members of the council have thought about it. I don't want to put this off. We've read this for a few months. I know I met with Debbie Anderson, who started that petition that Jill was talking about uptown, had a wonderful conversation with her. And we talked about what we wanted for Oxford. And I've known Debbie since she was in college. We talked about what we wanted for Oxford. And what she wanted was the same thing that Brandon Humphrey told me 2 days later when I met him uptown. And the same thing Chief Jones told me when I met him uptown. In reality, we all want the same thing. It's just we differ on the best approaches to it. And so instead of looking at this as us and them, hopefully we look at this as how do we as a community see where we are and see how we can meet the needs of the people and give the police department the support they need and that. So at that point, after I get off my soapbox, do I have a motion to recommend the city council and the city administration that they form a task force to research and fund alternatives to policing.
Yes, I have something crafted here. And the updated version does say complements and alternatives.
Okay, so
Okay,
give us your motion there, Amber.
My motion, I move that the PCRC make a recommendation to City Council, that City Council establish a task force designed to research, engage in, and/or fund complements and alternatives to policing in Oxford. And this task force should involve input from the designers of the proposal, including other stakeholders in the community.
Doug, you want to say something before I get a second?
I just wanted to, for Amber to go over the comment about fund.
Well,
to explore funding options or?
yeah, so did you read the proposal? It mentions at the end, there's a statement, part of this task force's job will be to research how best to fund the complements and alternatives.
Okay, I understand now.
And then they mention, are there grants available? Like, so they're, yeah. So researching the funding.
Okay. So Amber, for the proposal, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay. I think Jessica, I'm going to ask you to call the roll so we can get a clear vote, if that's okay.
Okay. Miss Story.
Aye.
Miss Franklin.
Aye.
Mr. Nadler.
Aye.
Mr. Cron.
Abstain.
Ms. DeLong.
I abstain as well.
I don't want to interrupt, but we just learned that we're not allowed to abstain.
Right. We learned that at the lawyers gave us that last time. You have to vote yes or no unless you have a reason to abstain because maybe it's an issue before the board that affects one of your family members.
So I'll go back.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, Mr. Cron,
No.
Ms. DeLong,
No.
Mr. Wang. Is he gone?
No, he's here. He's not muted though.
Oh, there he is. Mr. Wang, you're muted. Okay.
Sorry, I muted myself. I vote yes.
Okay. And Mr. Mead.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. As far as business items, I think we'll close down quickly. Our next meeting is November 19th. Reminder to commission members that is a discussion about the ordinance itself to see if we need to tweak that in light of are looking now at more review things, and the Know Your Rights pamphlet. And Hannah, I'll get in touch with you about that since you've taken the lead on that one. So those two are the agenda items as of now for November 19th. With that, I would like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. In a second.
Second.
All right. And all those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Wants to keep going? Okay, no. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate everyone's hard work and honest input. Take care.
Good night.
Good night, Jessica. Thank you.
Stay safe.